But it's an interesting one, because you're effectively trying to capture, and certainly when you're working in the realms of DAWs and software, capture the sensation of air movement, which is what you get through a nice great big fat cab, and turn it into some ones and zeros in a computer somewhere. So it's kind of an interesting one, that point of view, how you replicate that. Obviously, when you're talking about amps and sort of in the sort of things that I like to do, which is mostly overdriven and distorted stuff, along with that comes a level of volume kind of required to drive tubes, because I think pretty much everything I have, apart from my bass stuff, is is tube or valve powered, and you need to give those a bit of welly to get the best out of them. Turns out not everyone has the same opinion on how lovely my guitar playing is when you can hear it really loud halfway down the street. So that's where, for me, the beauty of modelling comes in. You can make, effectively you can recreate the gear you have, or and then go to silly levels of gear nonsense virtually within your DAW and within your plugins. And you can get all those sounds to a pretty good approximation, but keep the volume at far more neighbour-friendly levels. So, and there's also the convenience of not having to have cables trailing all over the place and causing a massive trip hazard. So yeah, my stuff that I do certainly at home is all amp modelled stuff in software, and then I have the versatility of changing and tweaking to the nth degree, which is nice, but also a temptation to fiddle about with virtual knobs and buttons rather than actually get on with any sort of productive recording.
I think we do fall. I think we all fall into that category, mate. I think we're all sort of knob twiddlers, aren't we? Basically, collective knob twiddlers is what we all are.
Well, yeah, I've been called similar things over the past.
I suppose that leads me beautifully into the next question, because we've touched on DAWs a little. We've touched on some modelling. You are a Reaper user, I believe.
I am a Reaper user, yeah, on Windows. So yeah, I've been using Reaper for, I'm going to say something like 4 years maybe. And I had, before that, I was using GarageBand on an iPad and on an iPhone, which was obviously very restrictive, but kind of got me into the DAW space. I tried to play with Cubase probably 10 years prior to that, and I found it a little bit of a head bender to understand. So I was like, I don't understand that, so I'll leave it alone. Then the sort of nice, easy access point of GarageBand on iPhone and iPad came along. I thought, okay, I kind of understand this now. And then I moved on to Reaper, and I love it. It's great. It's really versatile. The installation is really lightweight. You can run it off a USB stick, which I have done. So yeah, it's really, really powerful, really cheap as well. I don't know how much it is these days, but I think when I got my license, it was like 40 quid or something. And that's lasted me, about 4 years so far. So £10 a year, less than £1 a month, for all that audio goodness.
I think
it's really cool. And there's tons and tons of tutorial material on the internet for it as well. Like if you're stuck, it doesn't take long to figure out what you need to do just by the amount of material that's out there for it.
I was about to touch on that. I mean, because Rick's been using it. I mean, he was always he used Adobe Audition. Obviously, I kind of live in the snobbery of Pro Tools world and Logic. But what I have seen from Reaper and seeing it develop, because obviously when it first came out, it didn't really have very good MIDI capabilities, if any, I believe. I could be wrong there. But the way they've developed it for the price they charge, it's a really good looking bit of software. They've done a lot of work on the GUI, if you like, or the HUD. And as you say, like the tutorials really are second to none. It's almost like if anyone wants to kind of get into music, sure, I probably would say that getting something like Logic gives you access to like a ton of plugins. I mean, it's just ridiculous the amount of plugins that you get. So from a money standpoint, you're gonna get a lot. But I think in terms of actually like starting music production, learning from the bottom on a very inexpensive budget, I think Reaper really is, you know, you can use it for whatever you want, and I have seen it being used in advanced professional, you know, situations, and there's no, you know, it's a very impressive piece of software. It's definitely a cool thing.
It's pretty scalable. I mean, I've not seen it firsthand used in industry situations. So quite a few game dev studios are now using it in the game world, which is kind of interesting to see. You know, in that sense, it's the new kid on the block, knocking on the door of the Pro Tools and the Logics of the world, which is kind of cool to see. You know, another player in the market keeps everybody sort of fresh and paying attention to making good products.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you can use it for video editing as well. You know, if
really?
you wanted to start, you can just drop video in as if it were any other kind of media type, and you can mute out the audio, do ADR stuff, sound replacement, all sorts of cool stuff.
Really cool.
Do filters and visual craziness. But yeah, I mean, if you were even thinking about you wanted to start up a podcast or YouTube channel and you wanted something to edit your videos or your audio in, Reaper would be a great choice for that because it's got a bunch of built-in plugins anyway. So, just get yourself a half-decent USB, pretty much away.
I think as well, because my opinion, it used to be if you were a Windows user, you were of course were using Cubase, you were using Pro Tools, what is it, Cakewalks, what's it called? It's slipped my mind. It's Sonar. Sonar was a big one as well, but I think it's nice as well that the Windows has kind of got its like really. I think that whole Mac Windows argument. I used to be a big time, it's Apple, and I still am a bit like that. I mean, all my systems are pretty much on that sphere. But I actually think, looking at the later Windows operating systems, seeing how it's kind of dealing with audio. Their drivers, ACO drivers, etc. It seems to be comparable in many ways to me now. Now I might get shot down for that, but I feel like that argument isn't really valid anymore.
I think personal preference will, be the overriding factor. And if you've been a Mac user for 10 years or whatever, then the Mac ecosystem and the Mac world makes sense to you. Ultimately, if you get the results you want out of it, it doesn't really matter what you're using. But yeah, I think you're right. Only with the Windows side of things closed the gap quite considerably, because it used to be the case that if you're doing anything media related, audio and or video, Apple was the platform, and that was kind of the end of the argument. But that's not really the case so much anymore. I have used Mac quite a long time ago now, so I haven't touched one in a while, and I do find the interface slightly confusing. But for me, I mean, I use Windows stuff, in my daily work, and I have done for years. So I know Windows and how to use it. So it's like, do I get myself a MacBook and go down that route, or do I just, spec up my PC a bit and go with the Windows version of Reaper? I thought, well, I already know the ecosystem, I know the interface, I know the OS, so let's just do that, and it's working for me.
Absolutely. I think I mean, it was really interesting, the kind of, because I remember coming to visit you a few years ago now, and you were kind of showing me the whole, like, the iOS, kind of, there's a whole kind of movement, isn't there, in philosophy of people kind of literally locking themselves into those platforms to produce music. And there are actually fully fledged workstations, they're DAWs on an iPad now. I think it's called Aria or something like that.
I had a version of that on my iPad.
I mean, how did I suppose, because I was quite, some of the stuff you sent me that you've been doing there was quite incredible, and you can see that it would be possible to produce songs on an iPad. I think your production's got vastly better since moving to Reaper. And obviously we'll come on to talk about, because I know you're experimenting with some drums at one point as well, using kind of an electric kit. We'll come onto that. But I think, I think it was quite a cool thing that you were doing at the time, where you were kind of almost virtually plugging in pedals through different apps you were showing me and things like that. Like, do you think there's a lot of capability for an iPad producer, if you like?
Absolutely. I think the reason I moved away from it, as much as anything else, was just storage capacity on the device. When you're dealing with audio, and especially when you want as higher quality source audio and stuff as you can, you're dealing with uncompressed WAVs and the like, and they're big, fat, heavy files. And I was just running out of space on my iPad. And it's an old one now. I think it's 4th gen, so it's a bit creaky. And it's not as responsive as it once was, and it's not as capable of running heavy duty software like DAWs as much anymore. But that said, I think creativity thrives under restriction, and certainly when you limit your focus down to, okay, so this tablet thing is basically what I've got, and a little bit of other gear, guitar pedals and stuff, route something out of the headphone and back in, to get additional effects. So I think you can get quite creative with that kind of approach. And like anything, if you spend enough time working in that environment, you will find tips and tricks and hacks and ways of achieving stuff, and you'll become, you'll get to mastery level of that particular setup, and you'll be able to achieve really interesting, really good results just by virtue of experimentation and the amount of time and energy you spend in that kind of environment.
Absolutely, and I think it did really impress me when I saw that setup, because I'd never sort of, I think there is an argument for kind of starting in the way I did, which was always very much desktop computer. We've got to have this big screen, and we've got to have multiple screens. And in some ways, I know we touched on this before, but the tech can kind of hold you back in that sense that you've got too many options. It's too advanced. And I think, if you choose to actually limit yourself to one specific thing, I think people will be quite surprised at the level they can achieve by doing that. Keeps you focused.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you say, once you broaden out a little bit in terms of your equipment and your software and stuff, and you've got the racks, and then you've got outboard gear and all this other stuff going on. That virtual knob twiddling thing can come into play quite a lot. To the detriment of actually creating music and doing productive stuff. You can spend hours, days, weeks moving stuff around and not really get that much more of a benefit out of it, and effectively, not really improving on the result you already had. I think an amount of sort of discipline is required and well worth bearing in mind in terms of, okay, so I could go off and buy these 50,000 plugins from all these different vendors and stuff that will give me the EQ that all the studios are using these days, or the compressor to end all compressors or whatever. But if you just spend enough time using more basic tools that you already have, you will eventually find ways of getting those to perform in the way that you want and get the results that you want. And I think there's certainly for me personally, there's a bit of a perfectionist syndrome going on. Sort of let's just move that a little bit, let's move this a little bit, or there's a fluff note, I need to re-record the whole thing, and then you end up sort of going so overboard you never want to hear the piece of music ever again, and you just save it on the hard drive and never touch it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It never goes anywhere, and it's that was not necessarily a waste of time, but it was certainly a wasted opportunity. I think just sort of going, okay, this is what it is, let's just focus on this small area, and if I need something, really need it, then we can experiment and go, oh, actually, I've already downloaded like 5 compressors that I've completely forgotten about, stored in this random folder on my hard drive. Let's see what I've already got rather than chasing the tone to the nth degree.
I think you're absolutely hitting it on the head there, mate. Like, I think people forget that there's a lot of money being made in this industry. And I think because people are trying to create an art, and it's a reflection of them, and it's part of their DNA, they're wanting to make it, they're being so particular, I suppose, about how that output sounds, that people, they can tap in these companies and they can make a lot of money out of you. When really you could have achieved, like you say, a similar result, or even a different or better result, just using what you had. I mean, a good example of that, I suppose, was you sent me like a 10-minute kind of like demo track, I suppose, or an idea for a project you had in the black metal world, in the extreme metals, and it had a really cool piano at the start of the song, and when I think we had a couple of beers, didn't we? And we spoke about it, and you said, "Oh yeah, that was a cheap free piano plugin," and then I kind of put some vinyl stuff over it and did some EQ and put that, and I think that's you didn't need to actually spend anything, and you got a really cool sound.
Yeah, I mean, obviously beyond Reaper and the keyboard that I used for that, the piano plugin was free. I can't remember where that came from, but I didn't have to spend anything on that. The vinyl thing was another freebie, and I think the various EQ, I put a couple of EQ passes on it, and I think those are the stock Reaper ones, so no additional outlay for that. There might have been some other effect that possibly came with a bundle or something, but the point remains, I didn't go out and spend 10, 20, 50, 100 plus pounds or whatever, shiny piano VST that I didn't need because I already had a thing. So I've never actually used this VST before, so I'm going to load it up and have a play. Oh, that sounds cool. Let's see what happens if I do this to it. And then the explorative learning journey begins of what happens when I do this, what happens when I do that. I want to get this sound, how am I going to achieve that? And then you work with the tools that you have until you get something. And I think a lot of the time I might not have like an end vision of what I want to achieve. I've got an idea of the kind of ballpark I want it in, but I'll kind of let it find its own way organically. I go, actually, that sounds pretty cool. Let's put that now against the thing that I was going to have it coming into. Because I think that piece you're referring to has that piano intro and then some guitars and stuff fading in.
That's right.
And it's like, okay, let's put those together, do a bit of a quick fade job on it just to see what it sounds like. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's polish that up, tidy it up, get the timings right, and then you're kind of then able to move on. And I think if you and again, just speaking from my own perspective, if you're able to kind of put aside perfectionist tendencies and be a bit more open, having a more of an open mindset to letting things grow and sort of organically find their own way, it's kind of then the piece you're working on kind of it goes through a journey.
Absolutely.
And you're kind of helping that thing become the thing that it ends up being, rather than just going, I want this, and anything other than this is not acceptable to me for whatever reason. I've certainly found that a very rewarding way to approach it. Especially with that black metal thing. I think it was like 9-10 minutes long, and it never ended. I never intended at the start to have a really, really long track. I was thinking, usually my benchmark is somewhere between 4 and 6 minutes is a nice length to kind of express quite a lot of stuff in musically. I think anything shorter than that, for me, personally, tends to feel a little bit too brief.
Sure.
I know that's kind of, you're then sort of touching on the pop world format, and you have quick consumable stuff. But for me, if you want to do something a little bit more interesting, 4 to 6 minutes is kind of a good place to aim for. And then it just ended up growing, and I thought, come up with a riff and say, oh, that sounds pretty cool. Where am I going to put that? Well, let's see what happens if I put it on the end. And then, almost, Black Sabbath style, a whole other song gets then bolted onto the end of this song that's already 6 minutes long. It's like, okay, yeah, I think I'll probably stop writing material for this one now.
Yeah, we've got to the 7
trim it down and arrange it.